Buenos dias, Liam, and thank you for joining us today at Business Spotlight Series. Today, I'm excited to introduce Liam Hunt, CEO of Ambic Manufacturing. They manufacture bespoke contract furniture for a global market in any industry. So, Liam, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Javier. Really appreciate it.
Great. Well, Liam, let's tell us, how do you end up, where you are today?
It's an interesting one. It is an interesting story. I mean, my plan originally was to kind of go into Formula One, and my plan was because of that to go to university and study automotive engineering or motorsport. Spoke to my dad, and my dad sort of gave me some pretty sound advice to say, listen, let's try and look at the automotive side rather than motorsport. Let's not be as niche as we can do. Let's not be sort of strict in where we're going to end up going, and try and keep those options open. So I took his advice, went to university, studied automotive engineering, and it went pretty well. I got headhunted by a company called SolidWorks. So they work in multiple different industries, in multiple different companies all over the Northeast, well, to be honest, all over the UK and the world, actually. And I got to see some fantastic engineering businesses. I went out and saw some great engineering leaders, some great facilities and how they worked. And I thought, yeah, this is where I would like to end up. And one of those was actually a customer of mine, was Ambic. So the company that I now own alongside my father-in-law, which we basically, I worked with them very closely, helped them to try and improve the business. And the previous owner got me in and just basically said, Liam, I need you to come and work for me. He didn't have an exit strategy. And he obviously would like to have sold the business at some point. He was in his mid-70s at the time. So it kind of worked quite well. Then the other businesses that I have, the other small businesses, all kind of complement and supplement Ambic. So they're all sort of offshoots, they work in all different industries, very, very different businesses, but there's quite a lot of crossover between them all. So yeah, it's been a bizarre roller coaster, that's for sure. So I mean, since, what was it, 2018 when I started, Vespa Contracts was the first one. So the last 6 years, is it 6 years about? It's been an absolute baptism of fire, that's for sure. Obviously one business started from scratch, Ambic. We bought into alongside Stellar Blast and Stellar Performance, and obviously Custom Fit Campers, which we invested in as well. So a little bit of everything, all different things, having to learn, a lot in a short space of time. So yeah, it's been an interesting one for sure.
I mean, it's very brave to do what you did. And I love the word baptism of fire, because many people watching this recording will say, well, I've been there, or some of them haven't been there yet, but when they go through that baptism of fire, what would you say? What would you recommend? Or what would you take in it? Baptism of fire. What would you say to somebody who hasn't been there yet and may go through that in the months, years to come?
I mean, it's a tricky one because it always comes down to tenacity, doesn't it? I think anyone who's in business has a certain level of tenacity and is able to sort of react in very different circumstances and difficult conditions. And also, I think there's that nature of never giving up. I think that's really, really important. So the baptism of fire for me, I mean, every single company has had its own elements of baptism of fire, if you like. The biggest one being in any business that's not spoken about enough in my personal experience is cash flow. Cash flow is absolutely king to any business. And, when you start getting into larger contracts and your business starts to grow above a certain size, the reality is your customers expect you to finance their jobs for them, and reality is, I mean, I work in manufacturing. It's a manufacturing plant here in Chesley Street, 33,000 square foot. It's not cheap to run. It's very expensive bills. We've got a big wage bill, lots of staff here. And then to try and finance our customers' jobs as well, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So that was probably across all businesses. Everyone would say that is the biggest baptism of fire. I would definitely say is learning how to cash flow business. But I would also say culture. Culture is something that's probably looked at more now, but it was looked at less over the last sort of few years. But I would say where the baptism of fire, if you like, came about for me was obviously buying a business. So buying Ambic that had traded for, I mean, it's 41 years this year. So it's obviously the company's older than myself. When I bought the company, I was 29. And it had all of these different staff employed, all of varying different ages, some old enough to be my parents. And it was incredibly difficult because you have all these cliques, all these people that get on with each other in different ways. and people, you know, don't necessarily want to spend time with each other. But realistically, as a business, you want to be like that well-oiled machine. You want to make sure that everybody's sort of working synonymously and make sure everyone's working towards the same goals as well, and not just sort of going off and doing their own thing. So I think for me, the biggest baptism of fire that I've experienced is definitely buying an existing business and thinking and being maybe slightly naive in the thought that I could just sort of take it on from here and just sort of project further. And the reality is you almost need to check, stop, exactly, and just almost just reflect. And I suppose not being afraid to make changes as well, not going in like a bull in a china shop and smashing the place to bits, because it's very easy to do that when you see a lot of mistakes. It's to try and pick your targets and sort of execute them one by one. So yeah, that's probably the best way I could answer the question.
That's brilliant. You mentioned a word there, tenacity, so important. So many business owners who have achieved a level of success, they talk about tenacity, consistency. Definitely. Well, Woody Allen, the actor, mentioned that 80% of success consists in showing up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, showing up, you know, it's so much truth in it. Brilliant. Tell us a little bit about recruitment. Many of the people we talk to, they said what you said before the interview. You know, recruitment. You know, finding talent, retaining talent. What's your experience on this in the current market?
I mean, brilliant question, and it's something that anybody in the manufacturing world suffers from. And finding good people is difficult. Finding good people is incredibly difficult, and then it's even more difficult to retain them. So I mentioned company culture previously. You know, my eyes have been opened into how important a good company culture is. Especially it plays its part in retaining staff. You know, it's not just all about how much a member of staff earns and how much they're paid. It is about that company culture and all striving and being a part of, you know, the success moving forward. So I would say, yeah, I mean, there's a huge skill shortage. There doesn't seem to be, not that I'm having to go at the educational, you know, sector at all, because, you know, I think that what they do is fantastic. I think they're overstretched. I think they're they're understaffed and they're under budgeted. So it's a difficult one, but I definitely think we need to do more as businesses. You know, I've got something which I set up called the Ambic STEM Challenge, where we're working closely with schools and trying to do our bit to help this. But one of the biggest issues is this skill shortage. You know, typical people in school nowadays, the mentality is, oh, I would like to be a YouTube star. I'd like to be a singer.
Yeah.
I'd like to be, you know, or even the ones that are more academic. It's like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a solicitor. Nobody really comes out of school or goes to school being, I want to be a bricklayer. I want to be an electrician. I want to be, you know, a maintenance engineer. And these are the people who are actually earning really good money, you know, very stable jobs. They've got a skill for life. They never really have to worry about anything, whether they're employed or self-employed. And I think the eyes need to be opened a little bit. And that's what I would like to do. Because when I was at school, you know, I wanted to be a Formula One driver. I thought that was realistic, which obviously it's absolutely not, but that was my goal. And I think what needs to happen is, it's great for kids to dream. It's great for them to have this ambition. And I definitely don't think that should be stifled, but I think it's really important that we all have a backup plan. And I think it's important that that backup plan is realistic and achievable as well, because what's the harm in, for me personally, let's say, for example, I want to be a welder. There's no harm in me learning and training to be a welder while still striving for that dream of a Formula One driver. At least if I don't make that dream, I've still got all these skills in the tank to use elsewhere. So yeah, I think in terms of recruitment, it's always been a tricky one. The main problem for me has always been trying to get staff that adopt the company culture, get on board, and almost create a little bit of like a bit of sort of forward motion. And what I mean by forward motion is bringing in staff that can get on board with the mentality and the changes, you know, both socially. So outside of work, you know, the manufacturing world's had to change massively, but also just with regards to, you know, cultural changes outside of work, you know, working with companies abroad, etc. And I think just opening our minds and opening our eyes and having younger staff coming through, so that you're getting all these fantastic trades and skills that they are dying effectively. You know, we've got guys who work at Ambic who are, you know, 50, 60 years of age. So they're still got years ahead of them. But there is going to come a point where those guys will want to retire, and some of these skills that they've learned in the shipyards, you know, working on boats and fantastic crafts, etc., unless we do our bit in trying to transition that knowledge and keep it going, you know, it's not going to go anywhere. You know, YouTube can only go so far in
Yes.
terms of teaching you how to do something. When it comes to physically doing it, and it's a craft, and it's, you know, the quality has to
Yes.
be of a certain level, you need to be hands-on.
Yes, that's brilliant. You've mentioned about a child having dreams. You know, in your case, Formula One driver. I run a boys club, and many of the kids there. It's not a football club; it's a boys club. But many of the kids are in a deprived area in Scotland. And one of the kids, I say, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And he says, "I want to be a football player." Now, I quickly realized he wasn't going to make it, but I'm nobody to tell him that. Okay. So I asked him the question, how often do you train? And he said, twice a week. He was 16, by the way. He was 16. And when he said twice a week, he realized he wasn't going to make it. It was a reality check. Either he was going to train more or very interesting. So thanks for sharing that.
No, it's a good one. So I did something similar. So I was doing a careers week in a school called Fatfield Academy that's not too far away. And when I was there, so similar sort of thing. One of the boys wanted to be a footballer. I said, right, just stop for a second. Let's all ask everyone the question. And we went round the entire class, and I would say 70% of the boys wanted to be a footballer.
Yeah.
And ironically, which is fantastic to hear, there was about 30 or 40% of the girls wanted to be a footballer. Obviously, how fantastic the Lionesses have done, etc., which is great. But what I was trying to highlight to them was, hold on a minute, if all of you guys want to be footballers and you apply that across the school and then across the northeast of England and then across the UK as a whole, the numbers just, we can't all be footballers. And that's what I tried to explain to them.
Yes.
Not trying to smash the dreams to smithereens, but let
Correct.
them know that realistically, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to think through. The other thing you mentioned was culture, how important the business, the company culture is. And I think it was Michael Collins in his book, Built to Last. He talks about strategy. Culture, it's strategy for breakfast. Culture, it's strategy for breakfast. So it's so important to have the right culture in the business. Okay.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so what can you share with us? Well, you talked about challenges, the baptism of fire, cash flow, culture of the business. Well, you mentioned before, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's very, very good. And profit, you also mentioned before about profit. You know, some people say, oh, making profit. No, profit is so necessary because that's what I mean. Revenue feeds your ego, profit feeds your family. When you think that the way, say, okay, we are here to make a profit to feed families, to help the community, and so on. So this is wonderful to hear. What were you? What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is probably, I would go with Coach Carter. I'll go with Coach Carter just because, so I played a lot of National League basketball when I was a kid. So I spent time training very hard and intensely. But what it does is it's actually quite applicable to business, because it's about a coach who effectively tries to make a team out of a not very affluent area. And the kids aren't doing very well at school, and they need to get their grades up. And he comes in as the coach and basically just says, right, you don't get the grades, you're not on the team. And he just completely tears it apart and does such a fantastic job of, and I suppose it is culture. The culture is what he creates. And what he does is he's in an area where, the future of these kids, most of these kids in America, in this particular area in America, I'm not sure exactly where it's set, is most of them will likely end up in prison. And what he does is he turns their life around, gets them back on track with their grades, gets them a fantastic basketball career. And it's very, very similar to everything we're saying today about culture and just making sure, like you say, you can have a strategy, but without that culture in place, that's one man. That one man can have a strategy, but unless he gets the buy-in of all these players, the culture just that's what drives on. I suppose as well, it's the legacy, isn't it? I suppose you mentioned about the culture, strategy and culture for breakfast. The reality is, I can have a strategy as Liam Hunt. I can have a strategy for Ambic, but that strategy dies with me. Unless I might pass it on to somebody, and they might have their own interpretation of my strategy. But if I build a culture, then
Yeah.
hopefully if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, then that's my legacy and that will continue without me. So yeah, I think that's Coach Carter's definitely one that struck a chord with me.
Brilliant. Tell us, what's your favorite book or podcast?
Favorite book podcast, I would definitely say I'm getting into podcasts more and more recently, and I would say Diary of a CEO is fantastic. I would say Stephen Bartlett is such a great person, great host. He asks some very, very good questions, but I think obviously he gets some fantastic guests as well, which definitely helps. But I
Yeah.
would say for me, I don't listen to the podcast religiously, but what I do like to do, I used to do a little bit of fasted cardio in the morning. So I go to the gym and I just put my headphones in and I would just have time to think. And
Yeah.
I would listen to Diary of a CEO, and some of those episodes where he says, "Oh, this is a must listen to. You have to listen to this one." And the one that springs to mind was there was a gentleman who worked in the marketing industry for Apple and I think it was Uber as well. And just some of the sort of the little golden nuggets that are in there that you can apply to any business, I think are fantastic, and it's really good for helping you open your mind as well. It's nice to hear. I think a bit like your podcast yourself, Javier. I think it's nice to hear that we're not the only ones struggling with the same problems. That everybody has the same issues, the same pitfalls. We all deal with them slightly differently, but we can all learn from each other's mistakes. And I think that is one of the great things of a podcast. Yeah.
Definitely. So I always say your business will grow as much as you grow. So, and that's a great podcast to listen to. So thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
Who is somebody in life that has a big influence in you, somebody you look up to?
Good question. I mean, so the way I see it is like as a mentor, and I would say I've had numerous mentors throughout my life. One thing I'm not afraid to do is if I think somebody's better than me in a certain area, I've got no issue with asking them for help and support. In the early days, it would definitely have been my dad, without a shadow of a doubt. I still obviously go to my dad for advice and bits and pieces of that, but I would say more recently and definitely over the last sort of 6 to 8 years has been my father-in-law. I think my father-in-law has done an absolute. He's done everything that he could to help, and when I say everything, I mean in terms of, so he's actually invested in Ambic. When we were looking to purchase Ambic, I was doing it all myself. I didn't have any support or help. I was looking at a couple of partnership options, which were looking really good at the time. It would have added to Ambic's armory, and we could have really gone places with those partnerships, but those didn't work out. Now, I won't go into too much detail into why, but let's call it, a difference in personalities or what have you,
Yeah.
was the main reason why. So I looked at buying Ambic by myself, right before COVID struck. So I had a deal in place, was remortgaging the building and releasing some equity from some machines, as well as obviously bringing in as much as I physically could. And we had a deal on the table, and then COVID, the first bout of COVID where lockdown happened, that hit. And the bank came back and just basically said, we can't offer the same rates anymore. And I was just like, this has all kind of been for nothing. So my father-in-law sort of just said at that point, Liam, can I have a chat with you? So he sat down, and I did not realize, I mean, he's my father-in-law to me. We've got a lot of similarities and I get on really well with the guy, but I wasn't aware that he's actually doing really well for himself in business as well. He's quite a humble guy, which is nice. He doesn't go shouting about it or anything like that. And we sat down and quite quickly realized that actually we could do this with my father-in-law rather than the bank making a load of money off the back of it. We could do it with him. But it's not just the financial support that he gives me. I think for me as well, he's been a massive sounding board for me. I think, one thing that I hear a lot of business owners speak about quite often is how lonely it is sitting in this chair and how difficult it is to, really speak openly and try and sort of have that sounding board where you have, we're always thinking about what can we say, what's politically correct, whereas with my father-in-law, he's in a very similar boat to me. He's running another business of similar size, far more profitable than we are, but I'm hoping to learn from him on how to do that one. But yeah, and I think just having that person that you can speak to and speak openly to, at warts and all, and just say, look, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. Can you help me? And I think that's, for me, that's been a huge part of where I am today is sort of having that support system and support network, both financially and sort of, I suppose, motivationally as well.
That's brilliant. Somebody said, I think it was Jim Rohn, you become the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. So surrounding yourself by, great people, makes you great, really. It's fantastic. It's great to hear you have such support with you.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, no, definitely feel supported.
Brilliant. So just to wrap up, what would you say, what piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh, advice I'd give to myself at 18. I mean, I would say at 18 years old, I would say you don't need to focus too much on being a Formula One driver. Start looking. I would definitely say, I think the thing I would definitely say your network is more valuable than you sort of think. So I would say from a young age at 18, there's a lot of people that I worked closely with, but maybe lost contact with. And I think it's really important to stay in contact with as many people as you can in different areas, because you never know, when an opportunity comes up, or when you need help, or you might be able to help them. And I think that's one thing I have learned, is my paths have crossed with multiple people throughout my journey multiple times, and people that I'd never thought of. So
Yes.
I'd say the value in a network is really important. And I would also say as well, there's a few times I've been hesitant on decisions, and I would say just trust in your gut. I'd
Yeah.
say if I was speaking to my 18-year-old self, I'm quite good at sort of looking at calculated risk, but it's very easy, to talk about doing something. It's even more difficult to actually go and do what it is you're talking about. So I would say for me, the advice would be, yeah, I would say just, trust in yourself a little bit more.
Yes.
I would say I'd do that more now, but then probably not so much.
Brilliant. That's great. And by the way, you hear that phrase, that mantra, which is your network is your net worth. So definitely, it's a great one. Well, Liam, what can I say? Thank you so much for joining us today at Business Spotlight, and sharing your experience, and wisdom, really, with us today. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, Javi. Really appreciate it.